It's Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. For all your news on politics, business, and education, it's FloridaDaily.com. Now, here's your host, Ed Dean.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Florida Daily TV. I am your host, publisher of FloridaDaily.com. For all your news and information, that's FloridaDaily.com. Ed Dean. Let's get to our guest. Hanging out with us live from Tallahassee, the editor and publisher of the very well-known news website, The Capitalist. Go to capitalist.com.
You can call it a blog, but it's not.
I don't call it the blog. Come on, man. You're big time, man. Blog are like podcasts for people that really have a product, but they don't have a blog.
Like you're sitting in your basement, you never really leave the house, you just kind of blog. But no, we do a lot more than that.
I said you're a well-known news website. I didn't say you was a blog. You're unlike Joe Biden. You're not like the Joe Biden. You get out of the basement, right?
We do.
So anyway,
I'm actually in my office right now.
I know you are.
And
also
office
to get in. But,
that's right. And also Claire Goforth, our good friend from NPR, also from the Daily Dot, go to daily.com. All right, I keep harping on this. I'm going to start with you first, Brian, because I know Claire's going to want to come in and maybe clean out some of the stuff that we've talked about. I never use the word scam likely. But what I'm seeing from the Florida Teachers Association, I'm sitting here going, and a judge recently, for those of you just tuning in, a judge out of Leon County sided with the Florida Teachers Union of an order to block schools to be reopened. Pretty much what happened now is that the state sat back and said, well, fine, we're going to appeal it. So guess what happened? The injunction is kind of null and void temporarily. Now the schools must be reopened. Let me play for you one of the clips about this. Clip number 8.
This is part of the NEA's guidance on reopening school buildings.
Yeah, I want to get to that one. Here's this one right here.
A Florida judge says the state's mandate forcing schools to reopen by the end of the month is, quote, unconstitutional. This does not mean schools are closing back up, but the judge said the order to reopen schools or risk losing funding took local control from school districts.
A judge has sided with the state's largest teachers union over reopening schools. The Florida Education Association says that the court ruled the emergency order to force brick and mortar schools to reopen was unconstitutional.
All right, that's a little.
Those decisions were left up to local leaders.
Okay, that's a little montage from some of the news groups throughout the state. This, Brian, I want to start with you. This was all about.
I disappoint you. I'm telling you right now.
This was all about local control. Well, guess who's starting up all the schools? It's not the Florida Teachers Association. It is local control. This is the biggest fraud going on right now. Local schools have determined, and the teachers union, which had advised them in May and June, already have safety measures. This was all about local control, and they're saying that somehow the state's not giving them local control. Where am I missing this story?
Well, wait a minute. How are you saying the states are giving them local control? The state's basically saying start up by a certain date, and if you do, we'll give you the millions of dollars that you need to operate, right? Otherwise, they're saying if you don't meet this startup date, then we're going to cut you off. We're going to cut off the funding, right? Is that do I?
Well, startup date is also for online schooling right, as well.
So I guess I'm going to take the conservative line, which is the local control issue. And I'm going to point out the idea that Ron DeSantis has nailed this over and over again when it comes to local control with coronavirus. He has resisted calls by Nikki Fried, by Gwen Graham to do statewide lockdowns, to do statewide mask mandates, which I think are absolutely flawed. We don't want statewide lockdowns. We don't want statewide mandates. So why do we want a statewide order to start up schools when the conservative position is give people, push down administrative and authoritative decisions down to the lowest possible level? That is the conservative view of state government. We only resist that, and we do. And this legislature, and not just this legislature, but previous Republican legislatures have done some preemption before, where we've taken local control away because it appears that the local governing bodies are maybe abusing property rights or whatever. But in this case, I don't see what the problem is with the judge's ruling per se. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'll be the first to admit that. But at the end of the day, as a conservative, we want to be as flexible and responsive as possible when it comes to local governments so that they can respond when they have a flare.
Wait. Now, I'm going to have more of an argument with Brian than I am with you, Claire. What's going on? This is what I'm getting at. The judge says that this was usurping local control. The bottom line is that, and you don't have to agree with the Education Commission at all, they have allowed local control. I have sat back and advocated, if Miami-Dade is not ready, then let them determine it. But they are still doing online education, which means schools can still open up. What I'm getting at is that the teachers union have sat back and say, this is, we don't have enough money for safety measures. We're not allowing enough local control. The local control has already taken place, and that's how schools are reopening here.
The teachers union, and the judge was finding that they didn't do any analysis about whether or not it was safe to open schools when the state did this sort of statewide.
What do you mean? They were doing this back in May and June of this year.
This was what the order was based on, was because the state insisting on this really wasn't. It wasn't like there was this big safety thing. I think that this really what the governor has done is let some Tallahassee bureaucrat make a decision I agree with Brian on this, for the entire state.
Wow.
Now, just because the online school is opening, that doesn't mean the brick and mortar is opening, which the state was requiring.
Fair enough. But Claire, in May and June, by the way, at FloridaDaily.com, we did a big story on this. Brian, I know because you repost some of our stuff, which is great. What I'm telling you is in May and June of this year, local school districts, with the advisement of the teachers unions, were ready to open with safety measures. It didn't matter if it was a 20% increase of COVID cases or 5%. They already had safety measures ready to go. Brian, my question is, if they were ready to open, what stopped it?
Well, look, I'll give you this. I think part of the issue is a distrust, a political distrust that's going on. I've been saying since the beginning of this outbreak that eventually when it comes to schools, the teachers unions were going to do exactly what they're doing. It is no surprise they're suing. It is no surprise. Let's be honest. The teachers unions are political entities at their core. They don't put students first by definition. They are about teachers, and they are very political. And in fact, the teachers union president, Mr. Frederick is his name.
Yeah, Ingram.
Basically, Frederick Ingram. He basically taunted the governor at the end of the ruling, saying, "You were wrong. You put lives at stake and all this stuff." And I think that goes to my point, which is this stuff is super political, and I think that the governor and I think Commissioner Corcoran at the Department of Education were right to believe that these teachers unions weren't going to want to reopen and they were going to resist whatever happened because political chaos helps them in November.
Do you think? Hold on, let me get to Claire. Come on, dude. Listen, this is like Family Feud. You got 25 seconds to answer that. I'm going to get back to you in a second, Brian. This is what I'm getting at: local control, local control, local control. The bottom line that I guess my question is that I'll give an example. Several school districts opened up third week in August. Some was now going into the fourth week. Some the second week. It was determining what they deemed to be fit.
Right.
We saw here, Claire, some teachers calling in sick, going, you know what, I'm not really sick. They even admitted on TV, we played the clips, I'm sick to my stomach. Here's my, you know what, if the majority of teachers agreed with the teachers union, why didn't more call in sick to send a message? I think most teachers are pretty much not happy with the teachers union. They've got to make a buck. They're not going to die.
You're guessing that the teachers aren't happy with the union. You don't have any idea if they are or not.
Why would more call in sick to send a message then?
There certainly are teachers who have pre-existing conditions that make them a lot more likely to die of COVID. And what the state has done basically is made it so that these districts don't have a choice to stay open or closed. What if one district, the pandemic explodes there and you've got a hot spot in one of these counties? I mean, like South Florida, they got an out for this, but what if, say, Orlando had a huge explosion? Shouldn't that school district be able to make it their own decision about whether or not they keep the school open?
I think they should, but wait, I'm told if I wear a face mask, that'll take care of most of the problem.
Come on, Ed. That's a little disingenuous, isn't it?
Well, wait a second. That's what I'm being told.
It's not 100%. And these are children. Come on, these are kids.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, I think that it boils down to what I said before, which was that this whole issue is highly politicized. I think the governor and the commissioner anticipated that politicization. But you are correct. What they put in place early on, and it's not like they haven't done some safety evaluation of the situation at the state level. They did that. They said, okay, here's the criteria for reopening. This is what we want to see. But in the executive order, as the judge rightly points out, there is no such criteria spelled out. So, like, when are they allowed to close and still qualify for cash? And that's the real issue.
Well, hold on, wait, Brian. First, the local school districts were already having their own safety measures with the teachers' unions in May and June of this year. What I'm asking, if they were all getting prepared, they all were saying on TV, we're opening up in August, something stopped the faucet. what caused the faucet to be turned off then? That's what I'm trying. It's all politics. I think you've already answered that. But what political realm caused it?
I don't know that anybody said anything stopped it. It's just a matter of the whole idea that you're being forced to open, regardless of safety, is the issue. It's not so much that
they were ready to open before they were already being prepared to be open before the education commissioner came out with his some would call his edict.
Every single district was preparing to open. I mean,
most of them were.
Most, not all.
But you could have made exceptions.
It doesn't matter what you think.
You could have made exceptions for South Florida. The governor's done that, as Brian pointed out when it came to COVID cases.
This is a moving beast here. The pandemic isn't something that's just fixed in one place. It's going to go other places. And we open these schools, we're going to see cases. We're already seeing them in some schools.
Cases by all means. But what you look at is hospitalization and deaths, right, Brian?
Yes, those are the only things that matter. But I think the governor has it right on almost everything but this. Right? He's had this extremely flexible policy in place, which allows, which allows local governments to make local ordinances and flex up the restrictions when needed, and reduce them and relax them for all these other places that don't have COVID problems. And that's the right approach. This one-size-fits-all approach is totally wrong. It will never fit. It just doesn't work.
I think there's a guideline, but the school districts can still work on their own. Having said this, the teachers' unions have been complaining, we're not going to get it. Of course, they always complain. We're not going to get enough money, school safety.
You love teachers, don't you?
I
just
do.
A huge fan.
Well, I know. But they've gotten billions of dollars.
Everybody loves their own teachers.
And then they've got more money. They got more money coming in from the state. And yet, here's the thing: if you got let's say you own several stores. One store is busier than the other. We're going to maybe keep the lights off at the other store for maybe a few hours. We're cutting back. Well, if there isn't enough business there, then why is it the point to be open? For example, if more kids, I'm not saying all, but let's say there's a decent split in a certain district where more kids are going to learn online, not go to the school bus, then why should I have full installment of payment going out for a bunch of drivers out there? Why should I have more money coming out there if I'm not keeping the lights on?
Because the schools are getting rich. I mean, you're basically saying, well, let's cut their funding because it's going to be cheaper to educate them online. But we don't know that.
March, April, and May, they weren't open. Where are the savings there? No one's talking about that.
I mean, the schools are strapped for cash. I think if any dollar that they get, and it's costing them a lot more to do all of this sterilization. They're probably using that money to do the social distancing as best they can.
Where are they strapped for cash?
Have you seen these images of the kids in these little plastic cubes? It looks really. It would be challenging.
I'm always fascinated by those on the other side talking about how schools are strapped for cash. Are you kidding me?
I don't know.
I mean, there are classrooms with 50 kids in it. They're not like that.
Go to a college class someday. You'll see the same thing.
That's a different thing, though, isn't it? It's college.
Well, I'm getting prepared. Am I not?
It's public school.
50 kids. Wait. I thought class size amendment took care of all that. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have one more point.
Money flowing and all that stuff. I think who's strapped for cash now is the state, frankly, and I think we're going to continue to be strapped for cash. The less.
They're getting fed money. I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, they're $3 billion down, right? 3.4, whatever, in the latest general revenue report.
So Nancy Pelosi wants to throw another several billion. I mean, heck, why not go along with that?
Yeah, but I'm talking about real dollars, and that's the general revenue fund, not the fake federal dollars that we are inflating.
Fake federal dollars? That's hilarious.
All right.
No, but one last point. I think actually some of the school districts were relieved that the state took it off of their plate, because now if it's back in their court, if ultimately the teachers union wins, then it's going to be the districts themselves who have to deal with the teachers and the parents. With the state coming in, that they get to say, well, our hands are tied.
Well, maybe the
this
state,
is what we have to do.
If you're a lawyer as well, Claire, maybe if the state came in like Dr. Fauci with the CDC and just say, here are the guidelines.
He's not with the CDC.
Hold on. Just hear me out. He's with the CDC. But what I'm saying is just sit back and go, okay, here are the guidelines. Work within the guidelines. If they think maybe Brian has a point, if they redid the language, maybe that might have been a different outlook.
Do we need the state to do that? Why can't these districts do it for themselves?
I have no problem.
The reason the state's involved is because the state controls the purse strings. And yes, there's got to be some state guidance here in terms of here's what needs to happen. And there is some correctness in terms of pushing these teachers and these districts to offer alternatives. There is a real economic impact on not opening schools.
Let me play for you another clip. Martha McCallum had the National Education Association incoming president, Becky Pringle. It went from school safety here now to addressing school safety about the issue of race and color. Listen to this clip.
This is part of the NEA's guidance on reopening school buildings. And it says this: ensure that school building reopening plans are inclusive and equitable for all educators and students by humanizing learning environments and designing spaces that are situated in the experiences of communities of color, not just through white, cis, hetero, and able-bodied lenses. What does that mean, and what does that have to do with making sure that the kids and teachers don't give each other COVID-19?
That's Martha McCallum, host of The Story on Fox News. Now it's how does this dealing with the issue of race and color? I mean, you can do that throughout the year, budgetary process. The school board can talk about it. If you say there's not enough money to go into those in the black community, I'm all for that. You know me where I stand on this issue.
Sure.
But to use this as a part of the safety issue and we're not going to reopen, like I understand California has its own thing unless you defund the police. But I mean, when you start talking about that from the National Education Association, now we're mixing race about the safety of reopened schools. Claire, that doesn't jive. I mean, that doesn't make sense in many areas.
It is pretty confusing, honestly. I mean, certainly we can acknowledge the fact that the black community has been harder hit by COVID. We see a higher rate of deaths and serious health impacts, but I don't know what that was. I mean, honestly, it just felt like, I hate to say it because I do believe in the importance of a lot of the things that are values that are in that statement, but it just felt like someone threw all the woke terms into one sentence, kind of scrambled them up and was like, here's
all right.
Here's a statement.
Let's move on to an.
Yeah, I yield my time.
All right.
She got the answer on that.
Man, let's move. As we know now, there are how many amendments are coming up on the ballot right now? Not your local. What do we have?
6.
3 or 4?
Many.
Okay. Wait, for this year?
6.
I thought it was really? Okay.
I thought it was 6.
So I want to get into the all primaries. That's a fascinating debate. But the minimum wage is the big one here. Here are some of the clips here on the minimum wage and what's going to happen here in Florida.
Yes, Florida for a Fair Wage says right now Florida's minimum wage is $8.46. Now the group wants to raise it to $10 an hour starting in September of 2021, and then from there add $1 each year.
All right, Brian, the argument from those on the left and for those that support the minimum wage, hey, come on, Brian, if we're paying people $12, $15 an hour, we can afford to start them out at 10. Does that defeat the argument from all the business community?
I think here's the problem with minimum wage, raising it up, especially now. And I have a number of points to make. Number one,
okay.
This isn't a constitutional amendment issue. The constitutional thing is a big, big deal. And when we are putting something into the Constitution that becomes incredibly inflexible, and I don't know what the exact language in here is. It $15 an hour?
It goes every dollar per year till it hits 15
by 2026.
So it phases it in nice and slow, allegedly. But it's one. And then what happens in 2026? Does it just die? The constitutional amendment just holds steady at $15 or what?
No, they probably revisit it again.
Right. So it's like, is it sunsetted or something like that?
Then it would be moot.
But hold on, get to the point of the topic. I'm not convinced this is going to pass this year.
This is not a constitutional.
I would agree with you.
Question. It's stupid to do this because it's incredibly inflexible. And as we see with a global pandemic that came out of nowhere in just months' time and is now frozen our economies, it is absolutely idiotic to lock something into a constitution that requires a supermajority or whatever it is, 2/3, whatever that is, to change that.
Yeah, 60%.
We have no flexibility, and that's when we do too much of that. We do too much of shoving stuff into the state constitution. Too many big questions like that. Major economic.
All right, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I think that the reason this is even being entertained as a constitutional amendment is because people feel as though the state government is not taking action on raising the minimum wage. Meanwhile, every year it covers less and less. I mean, $8.46 an hour is not very much money to feed a family.
I don't know anybody making that. Heck,
Well,
I know a few making $10.
You're a rich white Republican.
No, but hold on. Can I, Claire? Hold on. Let me ask you a question. Hold on. Now it's humor. Let me ask you a question.
No, I get it.
If we believe that the local school districts, we're talking about local control, should if Miami-Dade, the pandemic gets worse,
But local municipalities can do their own minimum
hold on.
wage.
Should we ignore a statewide minimum wage and let the local districts, local counties do their own?
Well, there has to be some kind of guideline here. There is a state minimum wage. You say do away with it?
Well, wait, but we don't want a guideline when it comes to the State Department of Education on how schools should reopen?
I mean, forcing them to reopen is a little bit different. We're talking about children's safety here.
Well, what do you think a minimum wage statewide does? It forces everybody. I mean, the bigger companies can absorb it.
There's a federal minimum wage.
Hold on. But the bigger companies can absorb it. Smaller companies of 3 to 4 employees can't afford all of this. So I'm saying, I'm just saying, if you're all about local control, which I am with, Miami may be able to afford it, but maybe not in Taylor County. Why don't we do that then?
I don't know about. I disagree, Ed. Come on.
She disagrees. What do you think about that, B?
I think you're dead on. Here we go again. Let's push these things down to the local level. If a local community feels like their cost of living is so high that they need to jack up the minimum wage to make it work economically for them, then fine.
All right, let's talk about the man who's behind it, John Morgan.
I'm worried about people going home into poverty after working 40 hours a week and being further behind than when they started the week.
All right, so John Morgan's going to pour a bunch of money into this. Here's the question. And Brian brought up something interesting that we've covered, and let's just be honest, the economy is somewhat making a roaring comeback, but with businesses are being strapped, a lot of restaurants are closing down. The profit margin is about 3 to 6% we hear from business owners. And again, Claire, Walmart, Target can afford to pay that. What about the smaller company that employs 3 to 4 people that really it hits an impact on their back pocket? The question is this going to get to 60%? As of now, I'm not convinced it will.
I mean, studies have found that when you raise the minimum wage, people spend more money, and that gives those businesses the income that they need to support the minimum wage increase. I think we can all agree that if we do it too fast, we're going to have some negative consequences.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
It gives businesses the incentive to buy Flippy the Burger Bot, because that's what we're talking about at this point.
They're already going to do that.
Too much. Right, exactly. So how is this helping the
irrespective of what the minimum wage is?
Well, I mean, I think, but it's just going to accelerate it. These jobs, some of these simple, low-skilled jobs are just not going to stick around, and it's just going to keep.
Hey, hold on. Let me ask.
More complex.
I'm not as a former. Well, I mean, I still covered economics before I became a publisher. But I mean, Brian, you've known me for a while. I was an economics reporter for years, and some people would disagree depending on what study you're looking at. But having said this, why are we doing it at 10? If Target comes out, Walmart. I mean, Walmart's not really paying a lot in 15, but some states maybe they are. Then if Target in Florida is saying we're paying $15 an hour without government involvement, why start it at 10? Why not go for 12?
I mean, they picked a number,
Well, picked a number based on what? I mean,
exactly.
Well, no, I'm saying, Claire, if they picked a number...
It's an increase, right? Their goal is to get it to what the push has been.
You do a lot of commentary. If the studies that you cover as a reporter say, well, the studies show they're going to spend more money, my question is what are the studies at 11, 12, 13 bucks an hour then? Wouldn't that increase more money being spent by those that have a better minimum wage then?
Of course it would. I mean, it's trying to do a balancing act here. You're trying to make it so that people can earn a living wage, and you're also making it so business can afford to stay in business.
But I'm told it's 15. Why start at 10, and why wait 5 to 6 years before it increases to 15?
To try to do it gradually. Honestly, I agree with Brian. I don't think that has a very much a high chance of passing, honestly, especially in these times.
No, I think it would have passed maybe about a year ago. It got full-fledged. I don't know about now.
The restaurants restaurants alone have which are I don't know if they're the biggest source. They got to be probably the biggest source of those jobs, but there's just no way. They have a very compelling argument right now. You just drive around the street and just look at all the different mom and pop restaurants that are just closed and never coming back.
I mean, 50% capacity? Give me a break. So, all right. To me, we're going to continue this conversation. I find this as a fascinating conversation. Brian Burgess, thecapitalist.com. It is a very informative publication. I mean, I can say it's the greatest thing around, but, it's a very informative and I like it. And I read it all the time, by the way.
Hey, buddy, we don't republish your stuff.
I know I promote your stuff all the time, man. I get on my radio show. Hold on. I get on my radio show, which is
praising you, buddy,
which is hundreds of thousands of listeners here in Florida. That's documented. And I sit back and go, hey, we just saw a story from Brian Burgess from The Capitalist. So there you go. So anyway, Brian Burgess.
Listen, if you were local, if I could catch you around here.
Well, if not in your market, you can go to WBOB.com and download that app. If you're up at 6 to 9 in the mornings, you're just getting in. Anyway, so listen, all kidding aside, Brian Burgess from thecapitalist.com, and of course, our friend Claire Goforth, as always, from the political reporter for the Daily Dot, dailydot.com, and also on NPR. Another edition of Florida Daily TV right here on FloridaDaily.com.